The dry wind swept across the desolate plains as the sun dipped low behind the jagged horizon, painting the sky in streaks of copper and gold. And the rancher, Eli Thompson, rode slowly toward the old cottonwood tree by the river. The one folks in Dry Creek whispered about in hushed tones. The one where justice and vengeance had blurred too many times to be told apart. Eli had seen a lot in his 43 years, droughts that starved cattle, winters that buried ranches, and men who had lost everything and chose the bottle over hope. But today was different. Because today he carried something heavier than loss, heavier than any storm. Tied to his saddle horn was a frayed rope, and at the other end of it, stumbling with bloody feet and trembling hands, was a young stranger, barely 20. Maybe less, his face bruised, his shirt torn, and his eyes full of a quiet desperation that made Eli's jaw tighten every time he looked back. The town had caught the boy near the general store, clutching a loaf of bread like it was gold. And the crowd was ready to string him up right then and there, swearing justice, calling him a thief, a drifter, a no-good-nothing. But when Eli saw the bruises on the kid's ribs, the way he flinched whenever someone raised a hand, and the way he didn't beg for mercy but simply whispered, "Please, just don't judge me. I didn't have a choice," something inside him cracked, a memory, a wound, something he thought had died long ago. The townsfolk had insisted on hanging. Said the boy had been spotted before, hiding in barns, stealing eggs, creeping around ranches, and they didn't want another outlaw forming in their midst. But Eli remembered another hungry boy, years ago. A boy everyone had feared. A boy named Jonah Thompson, his own younger brother, who had run away at 16. After being blamed for a crime he didn't commit. And no one had chased him. No one had asked why, they had only judged. So Eli volunteered to handle the hanging. But instead of heading to the gallows tree behind the sheriff's office, he rode for the cottonwood by the river, the place where truth had a way of rising whether a man wanted it to or not. The boy stumbled and nearly fell, and Eli steadied him, loosening the rope just enough for him to breathe. The kid looked up, blue eyes swollen but bright with something that looked too much like pain for a simple thief. "You got a name?" Eli asked, voice rough as gravel. "Luke," the boy whispered, voice cracked dry. "Luke Harper." Eli grunted and they kept walking, water glittering ahead, cicadas buzzing loud like the whole land was holding its breath. They reached the tree, and Eli paused, staring at the limb that had held too many men. He pulled the rope loose from the saddle, and the moment his fingers worked the knot, Luke let out a sound, not of relief, but of something deeper, like fear that the world was about to break open. Eli turned Luke to face him and looked him dead in the eyes. "Before this rope hits the ground," he said, "you tell me the truth, why were you stealing food?" And Luke's eyes filled with tears, not weakness, but exhaustion. The kind a man gets only when he's been running from something bigger than hunger. "My sister," he whispered. "She's sick. I've been hiding her in the old barn over by Miller's Pass. She can't walk. I can't work nowhere without folks running me off. And I couldn't bury her." Eli froze, not because of the words, but because Luke's voice, that cracked grit of desperation, was the same voice Jonah had once had, standing in the doorway before disappearing forever. Something shifted in the rancher's chest. Something painful, something familiar. Eli took a slow breath, the rope hanging loose in his hands like a ghost losing its grip. "Take me to her," he ordered. They rode through dusk and into night, stars flickering overhead like scattered pieces of memory. And when they reached Miller's Pass, Eli saw the barn, half collapsed, half swallowed by weeds. Luke rushed inside, and Eli followed, and there, lying on an old blanket, was a girl no older than 17. Skin pale, lips cracked, eyes dull but alive just enough to flicker when her brother knelt beside her. "Emily," Luke whispered, stroking her hair. Eli knelt, checked her fever with a weathered hand. Felt how thin she wasn't just hungry. She was dying. And that was the moment Eli knew, if he had turned Luke in, that girl would have died in this barn, alone. The world went quiet. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of judgment passing from one heart to another. Lifted, broken, remade. Eli's voice was low, steady, fierce. Get her up. We're taking her home. Luke's eyes widened. Home? To town. They'll finish me. They'll kill me. Eli stood. Jaw set like iron. Not. If they have to go through me first. They rode back under moonlight. The girl bundled in Eli's coat. Luke holding her like a prayer. And when they reached Eli's ranch, he called for his cook, his ranch hands. Anyone willing to help save a dying child. Days passed. Fever raged. Luke worked sunrise to midnight, proving with every blistered hand, every tear-silent breath, that he was no thief, he was a brother. And slowly, painfully, Emily opened her eyes. The first thing she whispered was, "Is it morning?" And when Luke broke, crying hard into her shoulder, Eli stepped outside, staring across the plains where justice and mercy had collided. Word spread. Whispers changed. Not everyone apologized, but some did. And others stayed silent. Witch and Dry Creek was the closest thing to admitting wrong. Luke stayed on as a ranch hand. The rope was never used again. And Eli, for the first time in decades, wondered if maybe, just maybe, he hadn't completely failed Jonah. Because saving Luke had saved him, too. And if you're hearing this story, remember. Sometimes the person you judge the hardest is the one fighting the battle you never see. So before you point, before you condemn, before you cast someone aside, listen. Because mercy is what separates a man from the dust hill. One day returned to days turned to weeks. And Luke worked the ranch harder than any hired hand Eli had ever known. Fixing fences before dawn and tending cattle long after sunset. Never once complaining. Emily slowly regained strength, her cheeks no longer pale. Her laughter returning like spring after a long winter. But the town hadn't forgotten. One afternoon, Sheriff Briggs rode to the ranch, hat low and hand near his holster, saying the townsfolk wanted Luke brought in to answer for his crimes. Eli stepped between them. Voice steady yet unyielding. The only crime here is a community that refused to look past hunger. The sheriff hesitated, seeing Emily standing in the doorway, frail but alive, holding onto Luke's arm. Her whisper was soft but cut through the dry wind. He saved me. The sheriff looked at Eli, then at the family forming before him, and finally nodded. Dry Creek owes you both a second look. And slowly, the judgment that once condemned Luke began to fade.